One of my favorite stories working in Monterey Bay actually occurred just last fall. We've been trying to study humpback whales and how they interact with other species and how they feed inside Monterey Bay. So to do that, we've been working collaboratively with several other researchers, Jeremy Goldbogen at Stanford and Ari Freelander, deploying these suction cup attached video cameras. But on this one day, James Fallbush and I went out of Moss Landing and we were looking for an area where we might have humpback whales feeding, and we found this dense group, as has become more and more common inside Monterey Bay, of humpback whales associated with lots of seabirds and a big group of sea lions. And we thought, well, this is a really good opportunity. If we could get a video camera on one of these whales, we could get a sense of the sort of interactions that are occurring underwater between the different humpback whales, between the individuals, them with their prey, and all these other species that were present. But I was a little worried about how to approach these whales. We're sort of surfacing more chaotically. We attached the camera just with a pole. I call it a long pole, but it's really only about 10 feet long. So it's much less than the length of the whale. And with the whales kind of coming up unpredictably, how could we maneuver kind of close enough with these whales surfacing unexpectedly all around us? Usually I've deployed hundreds of these tags. I usually like to drive the boat, kind of control where the boat is, but you have a little more predictable sense of where the whales are than in one of these aggregations. So we kind of slowly eased in to this group, and it was about 8 to 10 whales feeding. I think we estimated about 100 to 200 California sea lions were in the area, and many hundreds of seabirds. And we ended up getting this beautiful opportunity where this whale ended up surfacing right in front of us, not too close, and we were able to get the tag on the whale, and then it dove down. And this particular tag had a video camera facing forward and backwards. And when we got the video back, it just, the beauty of these tags has been that I've studied whales for decades, and not really gotten a clear sense of what these whales do and how they interact underwater. And these cameras really open that up. The data they provide is fantastic, but the images kind of give you an ability to relate to what it's like to be a whale. And I think some of the most surprising things for me that I'm still trying to process is these humpback whales, when the school of anchovies would come into view, it would just look like a solid mass. It was not even, it didn't look like individual fish. It was so concentrated and packed. It just looked like a wall. And you could kind of clearly see it and see the whale lunge into it. But the interesting thing was the interactions between the whales and the interactions between the whales and some of the other species. And I think the thing that surprised me was I was so used to thinking of humpback whales as cooperative feeders, and I think in many cases they are cooperating. But in this particular case, it actually looked like they were kind of getting in each other's way. And that could be because maybe they hadn't quite worked out roles or routines, but you'd see the whale that we had the tag on, and would be headed for a school of fish, and you think, oh, he's got it lined up, and then all of a sudden you'd see another whale would beat him to it, and he'd have to peel off to the side and not get a lunge. And it seemed like almost the majority of the time he was having to break off. Now, on the other hand, it was clear that the sea lions and the birds were benefiting tremendously by the humpback whale action. And it made me feel a little sorry for the anchovies, because the anchovies were kind of left with a lose-lose strategy. If they bunched up together tightly, that would be the way to avoid being picked off by the birds and sea lions that mostly like to pick off prey one at a time. And so for that kind of predator, animals bunched together, it's hard to pick out one animal at a time. So that's why schooling is a good defense mechanism against many types of predators. But the one type of predator that it's the worst for would be a predator that relies on them being tightly packed together so it can engulf them in one bite. So here were the anchovies kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. They bunched together tightly, the humpback whales could just take them in one mouthful. If they scattered or got broken up by the humpback whales feeding, then you could see, and I hadn't expected it, but right in front of the camera would be these anchovies that got broken up by the school, and in the school from the humpback whale lunging through them, and you'd have birds picking them off right in front of the camera. as these individual anchovies were swimming by. And it was such, a rich, dynamic scene, and it kind of opened up that underwater world of how these animals were interacting with each other and with other species that I'd never quite been able to see before. And it was so dynamic. I felt a little sorry for the anchovies. I just kind of, I don't know, just seems like there was no way out. And it made me wonder, how did they survive this? We ended up taking the first 2 minutes of that video and unedited, without making any changes, going just from deployment in the first 2 minutes. And it's the most incredible thing to see, and when I get to show it to people, it's pretty amazing. And then I tell them this is the first 2 minutes of 6 hours of video, and we haven't tried to edit it yet. So I think that's been one of my most incredible experiences. It was really important to me to see this because it also drove home a key point that was important at that time period. That was a time period that there was also purse seine fishery going on for the anchovies. And what this video ended up showing, I mean, you can show data, you can make the point that the anchovies are the food of whales, and the sea lions and the dolphins and the birds are all dependent on it. But nothing drove that point home like this video, that just in that first 2 minutes you saw, this group of a half dozen humpback whales, and these hundreds of sea lions and hundreds of birds all dependent on this school of anchovies. And then you imagine that school of anchovies being eliminated by fishing, and fishing that doesn't necessarily even yield a particularly high return. My understanding is the fishermen get very, very low price for the anchovies, and yet this is what fuels all this incredible wildlife.